They say that some ideas are like viruses. They don't just exist, they spread, infect, take root in the mind and refuse to let go. Most people think of a virus as a physical thing. A tiny invader crawling into your body, hijacking your cells, rewriting them into something else. But the scariest viruses? They don't infect bodies, they infect thoughts. Enter SCP-701, the Hanged King's Tragedy. It's not a weapon, not a monster lurking in the dark, not some eldritch horror waiting beneath the ocean. No, it's just a play, a Caroline-era revenge tragedy from the 1600s. A 5-act drama about murder, betrayal, and a king who never should have been crowned. The kind of thing English lit majors would dissect over overpriced coffee. Except this play, it kills people, and worse, it changes them. Item number SCP-701. Object class Euclid. Containment status barely. All known copies of SCP-701 are locked in triple-sealed archives at a classified Foundation site. That includes 2 surviving copies of the 1640 Quarto edition, several 20th century reprints that keep popping up in libraries like a bad joke, 1 VHS tape labeled SCP-701-19 redacted, containing a recording of the last uncontained outbreak, and for reasons that should worry you, 1 steel knife of unknown origin. No one, and I mean no one, is allowed inside that archive without direct authorization from senior Foundation personnel. Not because the pages will bite you, not because the ink will seep into your skin, because the play wants to be performed, and the moment someone starts reading, it begins. Performances of the Hanged King's Tragedy don't always end in bloodbaths, only about 37% of the time. I know, not the most comforting number. That means 1 in 3 performances ends with the actors murdering each other on stage, sometimes using props that weren't there before, the audience breaking into a full-scale riot, attacking anyone nearby, regardless of prior relationship, and most disturbingly, the appearance of a figure that doesn't belong. The Foundation has classified it as SCP-7011, a tall, faceless man, wrapped in decayed robes, always standing just out of sight, watching, waiting. He starts in the background of Act 1 as shadow along the set, a shape at the edge of the curtain. By Act 5, he's on stage, and the moment he arrives, the play stops being a play. The Foundation does everything possible to contain SCP-701. They burn copies when they find them, shut down performances before they begin, track online leaks like a digital plague. But no matter what they do, the play keeps coming back. Sometimes it appears in college theater departments misfiled under obscure titles. Sometimes it spreads online, the script popping up in forums, perfectly transcribed in unknown hands. Once it nearly made it to live television, a 19 redacted adaptation halted just hours before its scheduled broadcast. Because if there's one thing the Foundation knows, it's this: the Hanged King is waiting. And every time the words are spoken, every time the play is performed, he gets a little closer. Incident report. SCP-701-19 redacted. Oh, the high school massacre. Want to know how bad it gets? Let's talk about the tape. SCP-701-19 redacted. A is the only surviving footage of a full SCP-701 outbreak. A high school theater production, somewhere in redacted USA. A student director found an old script in storage. Thought it would be fun. Thought it would be safe. What happened that night? Well, here's what the tape shows. The setting: a typical American high school auditorium. A student director makes an innocent discovery. An old script tucked away in storage. They couldn't have known. How could they have known? At 0 hours, 0 minutes, we see normalcy. Parents, friends, teachers filling seats. 5 minutes and 12 seconds in, the curtain rises. The play begins. Everything according to plan. 23 minutes, 15 seconds. Something changes. A scene materializes. One never rehearsed, never written, never meant to be. At 31 minutes and 14 seconds, we first glimpse it. SCP-7011. Silent. Watching. The cast remains oblivious to its presence at the stage's edge. 1 hour, 43 minutes, 32 seconds. Violence erupts. The lead actor. The king's death wasn't staged. The audience's response. Applause. They're already lost. 1 hour, 46 minutes, 12 seconds. The cast, in unison, performs their final act. 17 nooses. 1 unknown line. Their last. 1 hour, 47 minutes, 33 seconds. It moves. Through the hanging forms. Like a conductor before its orchestra. 1 hour, 47 minutes, 46 seconds. The audience turns. Chaos, violence, madness. 1 hour, 49 minutes, 1 second. Static. The feed dies. When authorities arrived, they found the 17 dead actors hanging from the rafters. 32 mutilated audience members. 1 survivor in a catatonic state. He woke up 3 days later, whispered, "The play is not over," and promptly gouged out his own eyes. Somewhere right now, another performance is being planned. Someone somewhere has found a copy of the Hanged King's Tragedy. A director who doesn't know better. A cast that won't realize what's happening until it's too late. And an audience that will never see the end. But for now, let's focus on one production. One small-town theater preparing for its grand reopening. A director who doesn't believe in ghosts. A cast who thinks it's just another show. And a stage where the final act is about to begin. Because this time, we're going to watch it happen. The theater smelled like dust and old wood, the scent of forgotten dreams and failed performances. Michael Graves took a long drag from his cigarette as he stepped inside. Black Hollow Theater had been abandoned for nearly a decade before Diane Carter, an eccentric millionaire with a passion for the arts, bought it. Now she wanted Michael to direct its grand reopening. Easy gig, he told himself. Put on a play, cash the check. Diane was waiting on stage, flipping through the pages of an old script. "You're late," she said without looking up. Michael exhaled a cloud of smoke. "Traffic." She handed him the script. The Hanged King's Tragedy. "Never heard of it," he muttered, flipping through the pages. "It's a forgotten classic," Diane said. "Caroline-era revenge play. We got our hands on an original script. Thought you'd appreciate something different." Michael smirked. "It's got that old and cursed feel. What's the catch?" "No catch," she said a little too quickly. By the end of the first week, the cast was locked in. Lena Harper as Isabella, the tragic queen, talented but prone to nightmares. Danny Wilkes as Antonio, the vengeful noble, a cocky method actor. Sam Cutter as Gonzalo, the tyrant king, a quiet but dedicated performer. Tasha Moore as Alinda, the doomed noble's daughter. Young and eager, the script was strange. The dialogue was too perfect, like it had been crafted for this exact moment in history. But Michael had seen plenty of weird old plays. He chalked it up to the genre. The rehearsal started smoothly at first. 2 weeks before opening night, things got weird. During a run-through, Danny improvised a line. Or at least, that's what Michael thought. "You're off script," he called. Danny frowned. "No, I'm not. It's in the script." Michael flipped through his copy. The line wasn't there. But when he checked Lena's script, it was. "Must have missed it," Michael muttered. The next night, it happened again. Entire scenes were different, but the cast insisted nothing had changed. Then there was the shadow. Tasha was running through a monologue when Michael saw it. A figure standing at the edge of the stage. Tall, featureless, dressed in old robes. He blinked, and it was gone. Nobody else had seen it. Unable to shake the feeling something was off, Michael did some digging. Black Hollow Theater had a history of disappearances. Actors who worked here had a habit of vanishing, especially those who had performed the Hanged King's Tragedy. The last recorded performance was in 1971. The cast never left the building. Michael checked the storage room and found a VHS tape labeled, "The Hanged King's Tragedy, do not watch." He pressed play. The tape showed a 1965 performance. The play started normally, but halfway through, the actors began screaming. Blood soaked the stage. One by one, the cast hung themselves, ropes appearing from nowhere. In the audience, people were tearing each other apart. The tape ended with a single frame. A shadowy figure standing center stage, watching, waiting. Michael turned off the TV, his hands shaking. The first performance was in a week. Michael barely slept after watching the VHS tape. The images were seared into his brain, actors hanging from unseen nooses. An audience turned to butchers, and that figure standing center stage, as if it were the one directing the massacre. He told himself it was just a hoax, some sick joke made to mess with future directors. But deep down, a cold certainty settled in his gut. Something was wrong with this play. The next morning, rehearsals continued. The actors ran through a scene between Isabella, Lena, and Antonio, Danny. Michael wasn't really listening. His mind was still on the tape until something caught his attention. Danny was saying a line he'd never seen before. "With this, the tribute is paid. The king is hanged. The court will feast." Michael checked his script. The line wasn't there. "Cut!" he shouted. "Oh, Danny, where the hell did that line come from?" Danny looked confused. "What do you mean? It's in the script." Lena nodded. "Yeah, it's always been there." Michael's blood ran cold. He grabbed Danny's copy of the script, flipping through the pages. The line was there. But when he checked his own script again, it wasn't. Michael forced a laugh. Must be a printing error. But as rehearsal went on, more lines changed. Scenes he had memorized played out differently. The actors weren't improvising. They were reading the words directly from the script, a script that was rewriting itself. That night, Michael stayed late to compare scripts. His copy remained unchanged, but the actors' copies contained entire new monologues, all centered around a masked king, a tribute of blood, a feast of flesh. As he flipped through the pages, a whisper echoed in the empty theater. "You will join us." Michael froze. Slowly, he turned toward the dark stage. The seats were empty, but he could feel something watching him. A shape moved in the shadows, tall, faceless, wrapped in flowing robes. Michael's breath caught in his throat. SCP-701. The whisper came again, closer this time. "The stage is set, the king is waiting." Then a loud crash backstage. Michael bolted, running into the dressing rooms. The place was trashed, mirrors shattered, costumes torn apart, and on the wall, scrawled in blood-red letters, "With this, our blood, it is the hanged king's." Michael was done. He needed to shut this play down, but it was already too late. The first performance was in 3 days. Michael woke up drenched in sweat. He hadn't even made it home. He had passed out in his office at the theater, slumped over his desk with the cursed script still clutched in his hands. The dream still clung to him. A banquet hall, lined with headless bodies, their hands still gripping silverware. A throne, towering and grotesque. And on it, a man with no face wearing a golden mask. His voice echoed in Michael's mind even now. "The stage is set, the king is waiting." Michael snapped out of it when his phone buzzed. Diane. Her voice was cold, shaken. "One of the actors is dead." Michael felt the world tilt beneath him. "Who?" "Tasha." She played Alinda, the doomed noblewoman. Michael stumbled out of his office and made his way to the costume room where Diane and some of the cast had gathered. The smell hit him first, coppery, thick, wrong. Tasha hung from the rafters, a noose around her neck. But what made Michael's stomach drop was her face. She was smiling, a bizarre, stretched grin, like her skin had been pulled too tight. Her eyes, wide and glassy, were locked on the stage, like she was watching something. Lena let out a choked sob. She wasn't suicidal. Danny clenched his fists. "What the fuck is happening, man?" Michael's mind raced. This was just like the tape. The first sign of an outbreak, a death that seemed like suicide but wasn't. They needed to cancel the play. But when Michael opened his mouth, the words wouldn't come out. The police arrived, ruled it a tragic accident, and left. Diane tried to postpone the show, but the cast insisted on continuing. Michael couldn't tell them to stop. His own voice betrayed him. Instead, they kept rehearsing. The play had changed even more, now entire new sections had appeared. Danny delivered a monologue that no one remembered learning. "Blood is the seal, flesh is the feast. The king will walk again. Michael's hands shook as he flipped through the original script. The words weren't there. Lena's next line was supposed to be a plea for mercy, but instead, she knelt before Danny, eyes blank, voice monotone. "We are his. The Hanged King watches." A silence settled over the stage. Then, for the first time, every single actor turned their heads toward Michael and smiled. Michael fled to the security room, pulling up the CCTV footage. He rewound to the night before, when he had heard the whisper. At 3:12 a.m., the cameras glitched. At 3:14 a.m., a figure stepped onto the stage. Tall, featureless, shrouded in dark robes, it stared directly into the camera. The timestamp on the footage kept moving, but the figure never moved. It was still there, watching, waiting. Michael felt something cold crawl up his spine. Tomorrow night was opening night. The theater was suffocating. Michael could feel it in the air, a pressure, a presence, something unseen but all-consuming. It clung to the walls, seeped into the seats, wrapped around the stage like an invisible noose. The cast moved through rehearsals like puppets on strings, eyes glazed, voices distant. The script was no longer a script, it was a command, and they were following it blindly. Michael knew they had to stop, but the words still wouldn't leave his mouth. Rehearsal was halfway through when the stranger appeared, a man in his late 40s, wearing a cheap suit, sitting alone in the back row. He wasn't part of the crew. Michael felt his stomach twist. The man wasn't watching the stage, he was watching Michael. When rehearsal ended, the man approached him. "Michael Graves?" Michael hesitated. "Yeah?" The man handed him a Foundation ID badge. "Agent Paul Renner." "You need to listen to me," Renner said, his voice low. "You're in serious danger." Michael swallowed hard. "No shit." "You don't understand," Renner pressed. "This play, the Hanged King's tragedy, is a memetic contagion. Every performance spreads it, alters reality. The last time a full show was performed—" "I know," Michael cut him off. "I saw the tape." Renner's face darkened. "Then you know what happens next." Michael did. The final rehearsal was the last chance to stop it. If the show happened tomorrow, there would be no turning back. Back on stage, Lena stood alone under the spotlight. Something was wrong with her. She had her script in hand, but she wasn't reading from it. Her mouth moved on its own, whispering something Michael couldn't hear. Renner tensed. "Do you see that?" Michael nodded slowly. "She's saying something." Lena's voice grew louder. Her words weren't English anymore. Not Latin, not any language Michael had ever heard. Renner's face drained of color. "She's speaking the king's tongue." Michael froze. Lena suddenly snapped her head toward them. Her eyes were completely black. She smiled. A noose dropped from the rafters. The ropes had come early. Michael grabbed Renner and ran. The whispering followed them, and somewhere in the shadows of the theater, something else was breathing. Tomorrow was opening night, and the Hanged King was ready. Michael barely remembered how he got home. His hands still trembled from what he had seen. Lena's blackened eyes, the whispered language, the noose dropping from the ceiling. Agent Renner had left immediately after, muttering something about needing to call his team. But Michael knew the truth. They were out of time. The performance was happening tonight whether he wanted it to or not. Michael arrived at the theater an hour before curtain. The place was packed. Rows upon rows of people filled the seats, more than they had tickets for. Michael's skin prickled. Some of them looked wrong. Too still, too empty, like mannequins dressed in human skin. The doors hadn't even opened yet. They had just appeared. Diane was waiting for him by the stage. "We did it, Michael," she said, grinning. His stomach twisted. "You knew." Her expression didn't change. Michael stepped closer. "You knew what this play does," he hissed. "You knew, and you let it happen." Diane finally blinked. "You don't understand," she said. "We don't choose the play." Her grin widened. "The play chooses us." The curtains rose. The actors moved like clockwork dolls, their performances too perfect, too precise. Michael stood in the wings, helpless, his mouth still unable to form the words, "Stop the show." Act I passed without incident. Act 2, the same. Then Act 5 began. The banquet scene. The air turned thick, pressing down on the audience. Michael watched as Danny playing Antonio stood at the center of the table, script in hand. Except he wasn't reading from the script anymore. His voice echoed through the theater. With this, the tribute in full, it is paid. A dagger appeared in his hand. Michael's chest tightened. Danny turned to Sam playing Gonzalo. Without hesitation, he plunged the blade into Sam's stomach. The audience cheered. Sam collapsed, clutching his intestines, but he didn't scream. He laughed. Blood pooled around his knees as he smiled up at Danny. With this fool's blood, it is the Hanged King's. Lena stepped forward, eyes still black as void. She took the dagger and cut Danny's throat. The audience erupted into applause. Michael couldn't move. This was it. The event had begun. And in the crowd, people were standing. Not people. Things. Faceless, featureless, wrapped in old, rotting robes. They turned toward the stage in perfect unison. The lights flickered. The theater shook. And then, the screaming started. The theater erupted into chaos. The audience turned on each other. Hands clawing at flesh. Teeth sinking into skin. The once still spectators butchered the living. Their faces twisting into something inhuman. Blood splattered across the velvet seats. Michael stumbled back, watching as the stage became an altar. Lena, eyes black as death, held the dagger high, her mouth moving in a language that wasn't meant for human tongues. Above her, the nooses dropped from the rafters, one for every actor. The ropes moved on their own, slithering like hungry snakes. Danny and Sam, still bleeding, still laughing, stepped beneath them willingly. Michael tried to scream, tried to stop them, but his body wouldn't obey. His lips moved against his will. With this, our blood, it is the Hanged King's. Michael turned and ran. He sprinted for the exit doors, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He reached for the handle. The door wouldn't budge. He slammed his fists against the wood. "Let me out!" The air shifted behind him. He knew before he turned. Someone was standing there. Slowly, Michael looked over his shoulder. Diane, but not Diane anymore. Her body was wrong stretched, elongated, her mouth too wide, her eyes black pits. And behind her, SCP-701 stood at the edge of the stage, waiting, watching. Michael felt himself being pulled back toward the performance. Because the play wasn't over yet. Lena turned toward the audience, or what was left of it. The ones who hadn't died in the riot were still seated, their heads twisted at unnatural angles, their mouths stretched into silent screams. And yet they were watching, waiting. Lena's voice rang out. "We welcome the ambassador. The king has come." A roar shook the walls. Michael felt the air grow heavy. His vision blurred. The stage split open, wooden boards peeling back like flesh. And from the darkness beneath, something stepped forward. Something wearing a golden mask. The Hanged King had arrived, and the final act was about to begin. The theater shook as the Hanged King stepped onto the stage. Michael couldn't breathe. The figure was impossibly tall, its golden mask smooth and featureless, its robes moving as if they were alive. The remaining audience members, those who hadn't slaughtered each other, began to rise from their seats. Their bodies jerked unnaturally, heads tilting at odd angles as if listening to some unseen voice. They weren't people anymore. They were actors, and the final act was about to begin. Michael tried to move, tried to run, but his body was no longer his. His feet carried him forward against his will, back toward the stage. He fought it. He fought with everything he had. But the play wasn't finished, and the script demanded his part be played. Lena, no longer Lena, but something else knelt before the king. Her voice, hollow and ancient, rang through the theater. "The tribute is paid. The feast is ended. We welcome our lord into the waking world." Above them, the nooses swayed. The surviving actors, Danny, Sam, the others, stepped beneath them willingly. One by one, they placed the ropes around their necks. Michael screamed, but no sound left his throat, because his hands were moving on their own. His fingers gripped the rope, and as the king turned his masked face toward him, Michael knew this was his final scene. The noose tightened around his neck. Michael's vision blurred, darkness creeping at the edges. This was it. This was how it ended. But then, a gunshot. The spell broke. Michael collapsed to the floor, gasping for air. His head snapped toward the entrance. Agent Renner, still alive, and behind him other agents. Foundation operatives, storming the theater, weapons drawn. "Containment breach, take it down!" Gunfire erupted. Bullets ripped through the masked figure, but the king didn't bleed. It turned toward them, slow, deliberate, before raising one hand. The air rippled. Half the agents dropped dead instantly. Michael forced himself up, stumbling toward Renner. "We have to burn the script," Renner shouted. It's the anchor. Destroy it and we break the loop. Michael's gaze shot toward the table where the script lay. The original pages, the ones that had been rewriting themselves for weeks. If the play itself was feeding the ritual, then it had to die. Michael ran. He dodged past shrieking audience members, past bodies still twitching, past the hanging corpses of his cast. He grabbed the script and threw it into the stage lights. The paper ignited instantly. The effect was immediate. The hanged king staggered, his form flickering like a dying projection. The entire theater groaned, the walls cracking, the seats splitting open as if the building itself was coming apart. The masked figure turned to Michael. Even without a face, Michael could feel it watching him. It raised one hand reaching. Michael braced for death. But then, the fire consumed the last of the pages. The hanged king let out a hollow echoing shriek. And then he was gone. The nooses snapped. The bodies hit the floor, and the theater collapsed into darkness. Michael woke up in a hospital bed. Renner was sitting nearby, his arm wrapped in a sling. "You're lucky," the agent muttered. "We barely pulled you out before the place caved in." Michael swallowed. His throat still ached from the noose. "The king?" he asked. Renner sighed. "Gone, for now." Silence. Then Renner pulled something from his pocket. A charred scrap of paper. Michael's stomach turned cold. It was a fragment of the script, and on it, fresh words were beginning to appear. Renner met his gaze. "The play always finds a way back." Michael closed his eyes. Somewhere the curtain was rising again, and the king was still waiting. As the final curtain falls on our tale of the Hanged King's tragedy, it's natural to ponder the deeper mysteries surrounding SCP-701. This enigmatic play has captivated the imaginations of many, leading to a plethora of fan theories and analyses that attempt to unravel its dark secrets. A prominent theory suggests that SCP-701 serves as a conduit to the extra-dimensional city of Alagata, a realm ruled by the Hanged King. This perspective posits that the play is not merely a performance, but a ritualistic summoning, designed to bridge our world with the horrors of Alagata. The recurring appearance of the mysterious figure, SCP-701, during performances lends credence to this idea, suggesting a deliberate link between the play and this otherworldly domain. Another compelling theory proposes that SCP-701 operates as a memetic virus. In this view, the play's script contains cognitohazardous elements that infect the minds of those who engage with it, leading to the observed outbreaks of psychosis and violence. This would explain the spontaneous deviations from the script and the uniformity of the resulting chaos across different performances. Some enthusiasts speculate that SCP-701 is, in essence, a sentient entity. They argue that the play exhibits adaptive behaviors, such as altering its script and ensuring its propagation despite containment efforts. This perspective paints the play as a predatory organism, evolving to ensnare new hosts and perpetuate its existence. Delving into the structure and content of the Hanged King's tragedy, one can't help but notice its deliberate descent into madness. The play begins with a semblance of normalcy, only to spiral into chaos as it progresses. This mirrors the real-world effects observed during SCP-701 events, where initial rehearsals appear typical before devolving into violence and insanity. The character of SCP-7011 is particularly intriguing. This shadowy figure, absent from the original script, manifests consistently during performances, often taking center stage during the climactic banquet scene. Its presence is a harbinger of the ensuing catastrophe, suggesting that it plays a pivotal role in triggering the anomalous effects. Historically, the play's origins are shrouded in mystery. Published in 1640 by the enigmatic William Cook, who vanished shortly thereafter, the play lacks a credited author. This absence of authorship has led some to speculate that the play itself is an anomalous creation, materializing without human intervention to serve a sinister purpose. Thematically, the play shares elements with classic Elizabethan tragedies, such as betrayal, revenge, and the supernatural. However, Its unique ability to blur the lines between performance and reality sets it apart, making it a subject of fascination and dread within the SCP community. In conclusion, SCP-701 remains one of the most enigmatic and terrifying anomalies documented. Its blend of theatrical tradition with anomalous horror serves as a chilling reminder of the potential dangers lurking within seemingly innocuous art forms. If you found this exploration into the mysteries of SCP-701 intriguing, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the enigmatic world of the SCP Foundation. Share your thoughts and theories in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective on this haunting anomaly. SCP. Subscribe, comment, play.